Hey, what's going on, Ram fans? Mark from Rams Up here. I'm going to get into part three of my parsing of the Rams schedule, taking a look at just two teams this episode. Those two first place teams the Rams play because they're a first place team in the NFC, anyways, the Lions and the Eagles. So this won't be it won't take nearly as long as the previous segments, but two really challenging games for our Rams. Before I get started, just last episode I talked about the 49ers salary cap challenges, especially in 2026, and I didn't see this coming. Maybe I don't have my finger on the pulse of the 49ers as well as I should, but they gave Fred Warner an extension, well deserved. I think he is the best linebacker in football. 3 years, $63 million. So he is now the highest paid linebacker in the league, and he deserves it. He's 28 years old, so 3 years kind of makes sense from the 49ers perspective. You would expect at that point, maybe his play would start dropping off a little bit. So Warner re-upped with the 49ers for 3 more years. So let's get back to the intent of this episode, and that is our part three of dissecting the Rams 2025 schedule. And real quickly, got the preseason games up here on the YouTube channel, the Cowboys, Chargers, and Browns. And then we have that weeks 1 through 8, the Texans at the Titans, at the Eagles. That's one of the games we'll be talking about here, one of the opponents. And then the Colts, the 49ers at home, and then at the Ravens, and then the Jags in London. And then we move on to the Saints at the 49ers, the Seahawks and Bucks at home, at Carolina, at Arizona, and then Detroit at home, the second opponent we'll be talking about today. And then at the Seahawks, at the Falcons on Monday Night Football, and the Cardinals. Now, if you missed 2 or 3 episodes back, part 1 and part 2 of this, especially part 1, I went through a lot of nuances of the schedule. I don't want to rehash them here, but I encourage you to go back and check that out. I think there's some interesting items. You do deeper dive into the schedule, some fun facts, shall we say, and same with episode 2. I don't want to rehash the same stuff, though, so just go back and check those out if you haven't seen them yet. And then what do we got next? Now let's talk about rest time. Now, in years past, the Rams have really been screwed in this regard, and so have the 49ers, actually. There was one year, I'm pretty sure, fairly recently, where the Rams played 4 teams coming off a bye, and there's been at least 2 years where the 49ers have had the same situation. It might have even been 5 games one year. And, for a billion-dollar industry, I've talked about this in the past, the NFL has to do a better job. And this year they did. There's a couple teams, well, one team especially, that is sitting pretty as far as rest time goes. That's the Detroit Lions. One team that got dinged a little bit, that's the Raiders. But overall, a much better job, especially if you're a Rams or 49ers fan. The Rams don't play any teams coming off a bye. They get some additional rest time coming out of their bye to play the Saints. And they also get a few days extra rest time coming off that Thursday night football game at Seattle, and then playing on Monday night against the Falcons in Atlanta. Now that gets washed out a little bit by the Lions. Again, I said that, as I mentioned, they were one of the teams that were the largest beneficiary of as far as rest time goes this year. They come off a mini bye Thursday night football against the Cowboys. They're off the weekend, and then they come to LA. But bottom line is, Rams did not get screwed this year as far as rest time goes, and the NFL seems to be maybe putting a little more effort into this, because I just don't understand how they can screw franchises like that. Just so the rest time, the difference in rest time, just unacceptable in years past, and they, for the most part, have it squared away, at least for our team. And for the most part, I think they did. Overall, I think they did a really good job as far as this goes. So we are going to talk about one of our opponents, and that is The Philadelphia Eagles were very familiar with this team. And this Eagles roster is stacked, tons of talent, so there's plenty of key players to talk about. Quarterback Jalen Hurts, he has established himself as one of the better quarterbacks in the league, especially come playoff time. Barkley, the running back, all pro. And we don't need to talk about him as Ram fans anymore. He destroyed us twice. And the Rams have to solve that mystery if they're going to get through the Eagles. Inside linebacker Zach Bond, another all-pro selection, as was wide receiver A.J. Brown, left tackle Jordan Mailata, and tackle Lane Johnson. And another all-pro player on the defensive side, Jalen Carter, defensive tackle. He's the one that made that play against the Rams that potentially cost us a trip to the Super Bowl. And two other offensive linemen named to the Pro Bowl, center Cam Jurgens and guard Landon Dickerson. And you know what? They got a bunch of other pretty decent players spread through their roster. We could talk about them all day long, how this roster is just so good. But they are beatable, as the Rams almost proved last year. So let's see, their draft picks. What did they do in the draft? Well, there's one guy that, a lot of us Ram fans wanted them to select, but deep down we knew they would not. But the Eagles went ahead and selected linebacker Jihad Campbell and their other draft picks, safety Andrew Mukaba in the second round. And another linebacker that we talked about a little bit on here in our Ian's review of the linebacker group. The linebacker prospects in this most recent draft is Mel Mondon Jr., and they also drafted the quarterback Kyle McCord. So the Eagles generally draft pretty well. So I suspect that a few of these guys are going to work out. And the Rams don't value linebackers. The Eagles do. I suspect Jihad Campbell is going to be a good one. Now, free agency, they did lose edge rusher Josh Sweat, but they replaced him with Josh Uche. And they also lost Chancey Gardner-Johnson. Seems like he's bounced around from the Eagles. Then he went to the Lions, right? Back to the Eagles, and now he's gone again. And they also lost running back Kenneth Gainwell, who I really liked, really athletic, twitchy, fast running back. So they signed Josh Uche, as I mentioned. They brought in cornerback Adoree Jackson and a UCLA product, quarterback Dorian Thompson-Robinson, and they also signed running back A.J. Dillon, among many others. So if you're an Eagles fan, last year, 14-3 in the regular season, number 2 seed, and what did you do? You took care of business, beating the Packers, Rams, Commanders, and Chiefs, and hey, you're the Super Bowl champion, but you have some concerns next year. And the biggest concern for the Eagles is that schedule. It's pretty brutal. Week 1, they get the Cowboys, divisional rival. That's that Thursday night game. Then they got the mini bye before traveling to Kansas City in week 2. Weeks 3, 4, and 5 are the Rams, Bucks, and Broncos. Broncos are going to be an improved team. They're no pushover. That's in Philadelphia. Week 7, they get the Vikings. Then weeks 10, 11, and 12, the Packers, Lions, and Cowboys. Week 14, the Chargers. And they wrap things up at the end of the year at the Commanders, at the Bills, and then the Commanders again. And that's why, in my opinion, what's going to happen in the NFC East, I think we're only getting one team out of the NFC East. That division is playing the AFC West. Some good football teams over there, Chiefs, Broncos, Chargers. I'll leave out the Raiders for now. And the Commanders are going to be a threat to the Eagles for sure for the divisional title. Cowboys, they're the Cowboys. They always get overvalued, but they could actually, get back to relevancy this year. And then the Giants, maybe they're on the way back. They gave themselves a timeout for a year there, and hey, maybe it's time for them to resurrect themselves. It's going to be a tough division, and the Rams, what are they going to have to do to beat this team? Well, they added Poona Ford, and they added some linebackers, Nate Landman, and in the draft, Chris Paul. So they beefed up that position a little bit. It's probably as well manned as it has been since Ernest Jones left, possibly even better when you can figure, that we have some depth at that position. We have a few guys that we can lean on as opposed to just Ernest Jones and throw another guy out there. I feel really good, much better about our linebacker position, and definitely feel better about our run-stopping defensive tackle, Poona Ford. So the Rams, they just have to solve that puzzle. And, the Eagles, what they leaned on last year was their rushing attack, 179 yards per game. And that's why the ability to stop the run when you're playing this team is so critical. Their defense only giving up 18 points a game, so they run the clock, and their defense is pretty darn good too. And their pass defense, especially, under 200 yards per game. So they got a lot of things going for them. You can run the ball on them a little bit, but you need to stop their running attack. And I think with some of the moves the Rams made in the offseason and in the draft, I think had the Eagles in mind. And this is a really good football team, 14-3 in the regular season, not too shabby. Won the Super Bowl, 4 straight playoff games, one of the best rosters in the league. Maybe there will be a little bit of a Super Bowl hangover. Maybe it's good we're catching them in week 3, but this is a team that can be beat for sure. It's going to take a great game plan and the ultimate effort from our Rams on the road in Philadelphia to put the Eagles in their place once and for all. Week 3, Rams at Eagles. Let's move on to our next opponent that we're going to discuss this week, the Detroit Lions. Suddenly we have this kind of a rivalry going with this team, thanks to the Jared Goff, Matthew Stafford dynamics, and Dan Campbell getting the Rams fan base spun up a little bit there in the playoffs. 15-2 last year were the Lions, the NFC North champions and the number 1 seed. They get the bye, and then they lose to the Commanders in the first round. Got trounced really at home. Bunch of key players we should talk about here. Jared Goff, we're all familiar with him. Running back Jahmyr Gibbs, wide receiver Amon St. Brown out of USC, he's all pro. Right tackle Penei Sewell, all pro. Center Frank Ragnow, all pro. And offensive tackle Taylor Decker, all pro. So they have something in common with the Eagles, don't they? A bunch of stud offensive linemen. Defensive end Aiden Hutchinson, he's a really good player. Remember, he got knocked out with that bad injury. He was hoping to come back for the Super Bowl. That didn't happen. Then there's linebacker Alex Anzalone and 2 safeties, Brian Branch, a Pro Bowler, and Kirby Joseph, all pro. And Ram fans remember him, don't we? That hit on Tyler Higbee. Still waiting for payback on that, are we? Possibly. But a really good roster here. Now, free agency, they lost 2 key players, cornerback Carlton Davis and guard Kevin Zeitler, but they did sign quarterback DJ Reed coming over from the Jets, one of the better free agents available. Other than that, I didn't see a lot of additions that were going to be difference makers for the Lions. And the biggest losses for the Lions, of course, are going to be their offensive and defensive coordinators, both moving on. Ben Johnson moving on, head coach of the Bears now, and Aaron Glenn, their defensive coordinator, also left. So this is, there's a void of leadership perhaps right now on this team. Ben Johnson has been replaced by John Morton, Aaron Glenn replaced by Kelvin Shepard. I can't tell you much about either of them at this point, but man, there's some big shoes to fill there, and we'll see if they can get it done. I would be a little concerned if I was a Lions fan. That was Ben Johnson, one of the better offensive minds in football, and Aaron Glenn certainly had that defense flying around a lot. They had some issues late last year. We'll talk about that in a second on the defensive side. Their draft picks, defensive tackle Tyleik Williams was their first round pick. The only names here that jump off the screen at me, if you're watching on the YouTube channel, well, I'll run them down for you. For those of you on the podcast, guard Tate Ratledge, wide receiver Isaac Tesla, guard Miles Frazier, edge Ahmad Hassanin, safety Dan Jackson, and wide receiver Dominic Lovett. And the only guy on this list that we talked about in our run-up to the draft was wide receiver Isaac Tesla. It was one of Scott Richmond's favorites, a big physical wide receiver. I thought he just kind of fit what the Rams do, but the Lions picked him in the third round, number 70 overall, and I have a feeling he's going to make a name for himself at the NFL level. Just a little prediction I'm going to throw out there. So, schedule highlights for this team. It's not an easy schedule, but they have a tough run here at weeks 5 through 7 at the Bengals, at the Chiefs, and then the Buccaneers. They come back from their bye and get the Vikings, and then at the Commanders and at the Eagles. This is what happens to first place teams, right? In weeks 13 through 15, the Packers, the Cowboys, and then they travel to California to play the Rams. So they have their work cut out for them. I expect them to be a very competitive team. I would not be surprised if they took a step back. And I think the Rams getting them in Los Angeles could be the difference here. They've barely gotten by the Rams twice now in Detroit. Had them on the ropes both times. Last time, of course, was the overtime game we lost to them. I don't know if I shared the stats on these two teams playing against each other. The Rams lead the series 45 wins, 43 losses, and a tie. And, of course, that last meeting, the overtime loss on opening day of last year. Now, we started to see some chinks in the armor of the Lions throughout the regular season, and a lot of it had to do with injuries, especially on the defensive side. Their offense still very prolific, over 400 yards per game. That was second most. They're the highest scoring team in the NFL, 33.2 points per game. Now, how much did Ben Johnson have to do with that? We're going to find out. But their defense, pass defense especially, really took a step back. 244 yards per game they were giving up over the course of the season. That's the third worst. And that's not going to get you to many Super Bowls. And, they found that out with that loss to the Commanders. 45-31 in Detroit, and I feel like it wasn't even that close. Moving on to the summary here, what I've been doing over these past couple of videos is giving you a worst case and best case for each of these segments of the schedule. I did the AFC teams, the 4 AFC South teams plus Baltimore. I'll run that down here again in a second. And then the NFC South, I did the same. And now we're on these two teams. And maybe this is a little bit of a cop-out, but I got worst case and best case, 1-1. I don't think the Rams can sweep these teams, be happy to get a win, and I think they will get a win. I think the worst case is 1-1. You're going to say, hey, Mark, they could lose both of these games very easily. I think they're going to win one, though. I just really feel strongly about that. They're going to find a way to win one of these. Hey, I think there's as good a chance they're going to win both as there is they're going to lose both. But I'm going with 1-1, trying to keep it simple and straightforward here. And where does that leave us? That leaves us, well, I got it here on the screen for you. For those of you listening, on the AFC games, 5 games, I said the worst case was 3-2. I mean, we're talking about the Titans and the Jags and the Colts, plus the Texans and the Ravens. Not necessarily an easy haul, but not that scary either, in my opinion. Remember, we're talking about the Los Angeles Rams, one of the clearly a top 6 or 7 team in the league. I think they'll come out of that with 3 wins and 2 losses. Best case 4-1. The NFC South, I felt the worst case was 2-2. I think the Saints and Panthers are still going to be down, and the Bucs will be the biggest challenge. And the Falcons, well, we don't really know about them. I think their defense is going to be improved, but I think the Rams' worst case is 2-2 there, and I think they could sweep the NFC South. Again, not going to get into it deep dive here. Already covered it in a previous video. And then tacking on the 1-1 worst case and best case, what we have so far right now, the worst case through these 11 games is 6-5, and the best case is 9-2. And we still have 6 divisional games to talk about, and we'll be doing that in a day or two, see how the time works out, see if anything else crazy happens that we need to talk about instead. We're also going to continue our walk through different position groups, limiting it to the NFC West, try to keep it simple. We've talked about the quarterbacks, the tight ends, and the running backs. We'll jump over to maybe edge rushers or secondary. I haven't decided, but a lot more to talk about in this kind of slow time in between the draft and, maybe there will be a second wave of free agency after June 1st. There very likely will be. There may be some cuts, and I'm sure Ian will be all over that if that happens. But next up, as far as this goes, those 6 games against the NFC West, our divisional rivals. We'll get into that very soon.